Welcome, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to my good friend, Jay Leask, who is Director of Federal Strategy for AVPoint Public Sector. I've known Jay for forever. So, Jay, welcome. Thank you for joining us on Three Questions, One Habit.
Thank you, Tim. And I got to, just so everyone knows just how long. So I got out of college where I went to school for technology. I got into the liquor industry. I left technology. I moved to Texas, and Tim becomes my mentor to get back into technology. It's been a while, and I thank you for all of that and for this time.
Absolutely. So, today the topic is sort of public sector consulting. And so let's jump in and say, question one: what makes the public sector unique from an IT perspective?
The U.S. public sector is definitely a unique space, I'm going to caveat that by saying everyone says they're unique, and ultimately the solutions tend to be very similar, whether you're in public sector or commercial accounting or retail. The solutions are actually all very similar, but how you get there is very different. Public sector, the biggest difference in the U.S. public sector, especially in the federal space, is their technology rollout tends to be, or at least historically tended to be, 5 to 10 years behind schedule. And I say behind schedule, I mean behind commercial release. So let's use SharePoint as an example. SharePoint 2013 comes out. The US government's still on SharePoint 2007. They haven't made it to 2010 yet. SharePoint 2016 comes out. They're moving into 2010 or 2013. And the reason for the delays is partially because they want to make sure the technology is proven. The U.S. government can't be the guinea pig on software. And also partially because it does take a little bit more time to move that machine than it does a commercial space where you can be more agile. Because in the commercial space, your job is to make money. In the public sector space, your job is stability. I'm going to go with your job is stability. So
Yeah.
actually, your
Yeah.
job is not to end up on the front page of the Washington Post. That's really it.
So how has the cloud and cloud-based offerings supported been affected by that, right? Because of the fact that obviously, evergreen type of solutions, and I understand Fed Cloud exists, things like that,
Sure.
so that they're often in their own way, but those don't lag, half a decade, right? In what
Right.
they're offering. They lag some, but not that
They do.
much.
They do.
Yes.
Well, and that's actually part of the interesting story too, is when the government started to adopt cloud, there was still a lag. And the primary lag was getting the commercial capabilities moved into the government cloud. That was 1 to 3 years, still depending on what the feature was and how important it was to any particular agency. Nowadays, actually, Microsoft has taken such an aggressive stance that they are actually releasing features simultaneous, at least at the lowest level in the federal cloud, the GCC. The DoD side, that's the higher level. That one still has a longer delay, but really, it's been interesting because there was that forced delay, and then all you heard constantly was, look, we keep hearing about this great new feature. We hear about Teams, we hear about lists or whatever it was at the time, but we don't have access to it. So talking to us about it doesn't help. Honestly, the biggest change factor for the government has been COVID. You and I talked about this. COVID hit and everybody had to work from home. You couldn't shove thousands of people in the same office. And in order for everyone to work from home, the government had to take advantage of Microsoft 365 or a different cloud product, but most of them had that enterprise agreement.
Yeah.
And that's really been the driving change is enabling the employees to be able to work successfully without having to be in the office where they could talk to and meet with people in person.
So let's go to question two then, because it seems like a natural transition. How has the industry changed over the past 5 to 10 years to better support those changing needs? Right, like
Yeah.
how do we get there? Right.
So it is funny. In the last 5 to 10 years, if you've listened to anything around government consulting, the one thing you've heard is the one thing I guarantee everybody has heard is consultants cost the government a lot of money, and that's not wrong.
Mhm.
It's how the good consultants are used. And what one thing I've seen on the consulting side is that the consulting agencies are streamlining the services they provide to the government. There is a lot less developing a report for what should happen in the future, and a
Mhm.
lot more prototyping and showcasing solutions much more quickly.
Mhm.
Um, on the software side, what we're getting, and again, going back to Microsoft, going back to Google, is we're getting a lot more focus on understanding the government need to actually drive development of the software. So I mentioned when we went back to SharePoint, we were talking about a stable version of the platform being installed. We are now seeing the government driving the features, which means they are going to be the first ones or early on in using these capabilities because they're actually pushing for some of the capabilities, especially on the information management side, on the security side. And so what used to be we'll wait for a stable release, they still want a stable release, clearly, but it is now much more I need that feature, I need it now, let's make it happen. So I think both on the consulting side and on the software side, we've seen a lot of change.
Yeah, and I think that aligns with just things that are straight into the Agile manifesto, right? Like
Yes.
responding to change versus having a plan, right? It's
Yeah.
yeah, and likewise, from improving perspective, we're very big into the trust initiatives, and listening first and delivering
Yep.
results, right? Because of the fact that if you're not listening to your clients, you're just going down the wrong path entirely, right? So no, I that makes solid sense, and I'm glad to be able to say as a U.S. taxpayer that we do have a government who is actually pushing and wanting to be heard and getting the features delivered that they want, rather than just
Yeah.
constantly being pushed around by what the industry is doing for commercial entities or the like, right? So
Yeah.
uh
And it is interesting because so the government, it's worth saying this. Again, director of federal strategy, so my focus is the US federal government. The government is a variety of agencies from the hundreds of people to the tens of thousands of people.
mhm,
And I've worked with the 2,000 person agency and the 90,000 person agency, and seen how similar their needs are, but also how different the approach is. And it's good to see the consulting field start to really adapt how they've done things in the past into being more of a delivery first mindset, and the software industry just being able to see solutions driven by government need rather than government need defined by capable solutions.
yeah. Yep. So third question, in these crush of vendors seeking to supply these needs, right?
Yep.
How does AVPoint distinguish itself from the rest of the field? Like
Ooh, it's a really good question.
how do you guys stand out?
So AvePoint is an independent software vendor, top tier partner of Microsoft. Our focus has always been taking the 80% solution that Microsoft provides and filling the gaps on the 20%.
Mhm.
And not on here's a widget, here's a web part, etc., but on actually understanding the technological need and doing our best to provide something that solves a problem. So we always been a migration platform. So being able to get customers into the Microsoft stack. We've taken our management capabilities and turned them into an automation platform. So not just the ability to manage across multiple farms and tenants, but the ability to automate those daily tasks, so that end users have access to the tool they need as quickly as possible, and IT doesn't have to scale up staff to be able to support it as much. And then also things like backup and recovery, like looking at the capabilities in the cloud and realizing that these big vendors, Salesforce, Microsoft, they don't provide a backup solution.
Right.
So identifying that massive gap that people were used to having on premises and providing something in the cloud. That's really, again, we are out there trying to solve problems, not just throwing, oh, you need an automation tool. No,
Right.
you need a tool that allows you to implement your compliance requirements while enabling your end users. And when's the last time you had someone say you could do both of those things at the same time?
No, you
So
do one of those
that's
things at the expense of the other, right? Like
exactly.
always, always. Um, so when you're doing your cloud-based, like when you're doing backups, I'm assuming cloud-based for the storage behind those, or are you calling it home? Because that seems like a potentially bandwidth expensive concept.
It's a very bandwidth expensive concept. So our default is cloud storage in Azure.
Mhm. Yep.
But we do allow customers to bring their own storage. So if they have a multi-cloud strategy, we can back up their content somewhere else if needed. But yeah, and frankly, the cheapest way to do it is store it in Azure, because
Yeah.
Microsoft does not like you to take your data out of their cloud. They incentivize not to do that.
Yeah, they don't charge you for bandwidth inside their data centers. They charge
Right.
you very much for bandwidth leaving their data centers. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, no, I understand that IT spend exactly. I have a bottom I have a bottom line for that one. Yes. All right.
Yes.
So, Jay, thank you for sharing your knowledge in these three questions. One habit. What was one thing that's made you successful that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah. There's I sat down with my wife. I'm like, I have to come up with a single habit that makes me successful. And she's like, well, you use a planner a lot. I'm like, I do use a plan. I have a paper planner somewhere. Here it
Yeah.
is. I have a paper planner that I use on an almost daily basis. But ultimately, like, that's not, I wouldn't even call it a habit, because while I use it on an almost daily basis, I'm actually out of pages and haven't touched it in a week. Um, for me, honestly, the habit I have is kindness. It doesn't seem like a habit, but to actually approach my work with a form of kindness, to make sure that I'm listening to people to understand what concerns them. I'm helping them solve a problem. I'm helping build people up. I'm helping to expose diversity in what may seem like an undiverse space. These all roll into, for me, kindness. And that has gotten me where I am. My relationships with people like you, with people at my company, they've all been built on that. So as much as I want to say, I get up every morning and I work out, or I've got my planner and my task list. Like, these are all things I attempt to do, but the one that really sticks with me is to be kind and to live by that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think that's something that far too many people believe, that life and goodwill is a zero sum game, right? And
It's really
it's
not.
simply
Yeah.
not, right? And the more you can approach your interactions with others, right, to constantly be living into, if I invest, the dividends that will pay will always be remarkable, right? And
Yep.
so, from my own background, talking about the early days in my career, where it's like, nope, I have tried to live like a mentor, and I completely agree with you on this point. I think it's an excellent habit. All right,
Yeah.
well,
Thank you.
Jay, thank you very much for taking your time to share your knowledge with us again. And then there will be links down in the post to all the things that Jay talked about today. And thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you later.